Hello there, Carpologists. I'm Joe, and today I'm joined by Dave Springall, and we're at Reading Anglin's Sonning Pit. It's a lovely big old water, so we can put some casts into the test. Now we're going to be talking about fishing safely without the use of leaders, because quite a few fisheries are now putting leader bans in place. So how are we going about fishing safely?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. There's numerous places now up and down the country where braid is banned and shock leaders are banned and lead core is banned. Low diameter lines are banned, so all the things that you really need to be generating distance and casting a long way are sort of being removed from the menu. So it's a question of getting around that and still generating some respectable distances, but with sort of using heavy gear, heavy line and big rods, and making sure that we get where we need to get.
Well, I've always thought with fishing great distances, leaders there's no other way of doing it. So what setup are we using today, sort of line-wise to start with, obviously is key.
Yeah, line is probably the thing we get questioned most about at Century. We probably get asked more about line than we do about our rods. And for this style of fishing, it's really, really simple. You need something where you're not judging the line or purchasing your line on breaking strain. Always do it on diameter, because as we discussed earlier, we've got a 15-pound line here today, which is 0.37 diameter and breaks at 21 pounds. I've seen 15-pound lines that are quoted at 0.31, 0.32, 0.33. I've seen them 15-pound lines that are quoted at 0.40. So is it really 15 pounds? The thing to do with, if you go on diameter, it's a far more reliable and far safer way. So 035 to 037 we believe is ideal. If you start going underneath that, you risk cracking off. If you go too heavy over the top of that, you're just going to be safer, but you're definitely going to cost yourself a lot of yards. And
that's without the use of leaders, having a strong line. That's not only if you're using a leader on a place like this with some snaggy areas, weed and things. If you're using a 6-pound line after your leader, that's not going to get fishing safely. So fishing straight through, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you have to remember, it's not just about casting; it's about fishing. So as we touched on earlier, we've all seen the social media posts where people are filming their 200-yard casts, and believe it or not, it's really easy to cast 200 yards if you've got half a clue what you're doing. If you're using 8-pound line and a 50-pound braided shock leader and a 5-ounce lead, but you shouldn't be fishing like that, not really, and definitely not on a place like this. As you touched on, it's pretty wild out there. It's relatively unknown. There's snags that we've seen. There's islands and bays and bars and weed and all sorts of good stuff out there. So I wouldn't fancy my chances or the Carp's chances with that sort of setup.
Fish, give you a peace of mind that,
for sure.
You can give them a bit of stick if you need to.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, another really important aspect of casting big distances is your lead choice. So what do you prefer to go with? It's
pretty simple really for this style of fishing. It pretty much has to be a 4-ounce lead. Again, if you go lower than a 4-ounce lead, we've got powerful rods here today. Obviously we need stepped up rods because we're losing out in other areas with higher diameter line, and we're not using shock leaders, so we need to step the rods up. So we've got 3 3/4 pound rods here today. If you use anything less than that, than a 4-ounce lead with this sort of magnitude of rod, you're going to struggle to compress the rod. The rod's not going to be able to, because we're losing a lot of energy already with the stretch in the mono. So the last thing we want to do is lose weight as well and lose momentum in the lead. So 4-ounce lead will give you like optimal distance, and it'll also compress the rod pretty well. At the other end of the scale, if you go heavier, if you go 4.5s and 5s, even a really good quality 035 line is going to be under a lot of strain with a 5-ounce lead, and again you're probably then taking the safety aspect out of it, and you're going to be cracking off. You may get away with a couple of casts, but eventually it's going to go bang. Yeah.
And now obviously we're just using a lead for cast purposes today, but what sort of setup would you use to be fishing these ranges?
Well, I just want to keep it, I want to be able to cast as far as possible, so I want as little clutter as possible. I don't want yards and yards of lead core that's heavy, that's going to fall out the sky. So again, I want it safe for the fish, and I want it simple because I want it to cast as far as possible. So just 12 inches of tungsten tubing, a safety clip, and this 4-ounce dumpy distance lead, and then whatever rig I decide to put on the end.
And also, obviously moving on to the main aspect of casting distances is your reel choice and rod choice. So what sort of things do you look for?
Well, reels are a muchness these days. They're all very good. Even some of the cheaper ones are good now. But really, I'm looking for two things. I want something with a nice line lay. I think it definitely makes a difference. Some people like the slow oscillation, some people the super slow, some people prefer a tapered spool or a parallel spool. They're all pretty good, they'll all do the job, but I want something where the line's going to be laid down nicely, and I'm also looking for quite a powerful reel. I want something with a decent retrieval ratio.
At large distances, you don't want to be
for sure
tiring yourself out constantly reeling on that.
So yeah, decent retrieval rate and some good line lay, and obviously a depth of spool enough to hold a decent amount of line, because we're fishing a long way out.
Yeah. And rod wise, again, what do you look for?
Yeah, rod wise, I mean, in our range we got two sort of realistic options, and we spent quite a lot of time on these two particular models that we've got today, specifically for this style of fishing. Yeah. So the one you've got there is the newest one, which is the Stealth Graphene, the GRs.
Light is the first thing I noticed.
Incredibly light, yeah, very, very light, which is down to the addition of the graphene in the resin system and the carbons that are used, and the fact that it has titanium PVD coated guides as well. So very, very light. It's 3 3/4 pound test curve, so it's a powerful rod, and it's actually based on this one, which is the C2D, which is really in real time a 13-foot version of that one. Yeah. So they're very, very, very similar action. We didn't need to change the actions too much because they're designed to do the same job. Yeah. But they're both very unique in the respect that you can hit these as hard as you like with a 4-ounce lead, and you won't have any problems, providing your line is good and your line is right. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you can use braid, or you can use leaders or mono shock leaders or braided shock leaders, they'll do the job equally as well. They're very versatile. So they're only rods that you'll need really. So the C2D is a 13-foot option only, and the Stealth GR is a 12-foot option only in the 3 3/4 test curve.
So moving on to casting, which you're about to do in a second, is there anything you need to take into consideration?
Yeah, it's slightly different if you're used to using braid and used to using shock leaders. The first thing is not to be lazy, and what I mean by that is if you're making like multiple casts on a day, so if you're fishing at 125, 150 yards in a big crosswind, you're probably not going to get every cast where you want it all the time. So you might end up making a lot of casts to get 3 rods or 2 rods where you want them. Over that period of time, making those big casts, the line's going to get weakened, so when I say don't be lazy, don't just keep using the same 6 or 8, 10 foot of line, because we spoke about shock earlier, so
getting the brunt of every cast.
Yeah, so if you keep running your fingers up and down the line, around the area that you're loading the rod from, you'll sometimes feel it starts to lose a little bit of diameter, gets a little bit thin. It's time to cut like 20 feet of line off, re-thread your tubing, re-wrap your rods around the sticks, and do it again. So that's the first thing to do. With braid, obviously, you don't have those sort of problems. You can just keep using it and using it and using it. And the other thing you've also got to take into account is when you load it, and when you load the rod and hit it, you're not going to get 100% response back from the rod, because there's stretch in the line. Most braids have like a tiny percentage of stretch or no stretch at all, so every last sort of bit of energy is transferred back through the rod, which is why braid is so great for long range casting. But if you're not allowed to do it and not allowed to use braid, you've got to sort of you have to take the stretch into account when you hit it. So you have to accept you're going to lose a little bit of distance, and also it might adjust your timing a little bit when you let go of the lead, because it's gonna ping a little bit. It's almost going to have like an elasticy feel when you hit it. So you might have to adjust your timing when you're casting a little bit as well.
Now, I'm keen to have a crack with this, but I also want to see you actually put them to the test. We've got quite a wind coming in now, as you can probably see from my curly locks blowing around, not so much yours, but we'll see how these perform.
Cool, let's do it.